talking to people, just like you're saying earlier, you want to convey your sincerity and caring. And it's harder to do that when you're masked. It's not impossible, because I believe your voice and your eyes still communicate, but it's harder. And you don't hear quite as well through masks either. So it's hard. It's hard.
My son and I painted, well, he did most of it. He did all of it, really. Painted his room.
Wow.
Had to take everything out of his room. And then, so he was living in the office. We got, we finally got it all painted. And then, now we're getting a bed frame. And then we got some other things for the room. And then we looked at carpet, and he couldn't find anything that he liked. So we said, okay, we're not going to. So he says, can we go to McDonald's? I said, yeah, let's go to McDonald's, and he knows that I eat much more healthier than that. But I said, yeah, let's go to McDonald's. And we pull up in the line, and this woman says, how long do you take your order? And so we really had to have her slow down.
I know.
and then have her repeat the order, and then, did this whole thing. And then she had something wrong where there was a Frappuccino in there for some reason. I said, no, we don't need a Frappuccino. Just chicken nuggets, 10 pieces and this type of thing, and a Coke or whatever, and fries. We had her repeat the order twice, just so that we had it correct. So we pull up to the window. Here's this good-looking Asian guy behind a plexiglass and everything. And he's like, oh, and he had a question or something like this. And so okay. And then, so we had him repeat it 3 or 4 times. Then he gives us the order. And it turns out there were 2 fries. He calls the manager over, which turned out to be the first woman. And they were both trying to talk to each other. And it was like a Seinfeld episode, for crying out loud.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like.
But, communication is not only, between creative people, and not only understanding what the other person wants, but just in day-to-day hello, and just in a day, McNuggets, fries, and a Coke,
It shouldn't be that difficult, but
yeah. And you can see that when that simple communication is not received, or it's not understood, that on both sides of the communication,
well, you get frustrated,
know? The person talking is going, well, I said this, and then the other person is saying, well, I didn't hear you, or whatever. Yeah. So yes, the whole affinity of the whole thing kind of goes down. And usually when good communication is happening, the affinity goes up, and what each other are talking about, and you have new ideas, and there's this understanding, and the world seems
positive. I try and have a lot of patience for communication like this, where you have, barriers, physically barriers, that we have to slow down. We have to almost exaggerate our eyes and use our hands if we're visually next to someone, obviously, to help them understand. And that's what I was really trying to bring out in discussing this, that we have to be aware when we're trying to communicate, especially when it comes to issues like etiquette, that are flexible and are often, I believe, constructed in order to be considerate. I mean, etiquette is all about being considerate of others.
Sure.
And their sensibilities, traditionally. So whether you have etiquette that comes from years of practice, behavior, and custom, or as a result of a situation that is put upon us, we have to try and find a graceful way of meandering through this maze of the unknown right now.
Yeah,
And I think special events has a unique role in this because it's a time honored event that many people want to participate in. There are expectations, there are learned behaviors and customs and heritage. And to have that all be masked, literally and figuratively, because of the pandemic, I think puts extra stress on everyone, the
that's right.
participants, the services, the sites that are all participating. And my heart literally goes out to everyone involved because it is taking much more effort and understanding. And I just truly hope that in a small way, our talking about this will reach people and and have us not judge as quickly and to be more open and understanding that everyone is trying to do their best for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yes. You know, what I have found, okay, I did a wedding this past Saturday, actually, and
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't my personal performance. They wanted a guitarist. I had a wonderful guitarist come and perform, and I stayed there to take pictures, and I stayed there to just cue things and make sure that everything was going well. People arrived. Elderly people did have masks. They shed those masks though, as you know, for
Mm-hmm.
pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And then I left a little bit before dinner, and no one had masks on. Probably about 19 people, or
Mm-hmm.
close to 20 people. They kept their distance, and I remember the seeing this elderly couple who appeared to be grandparents arriving through this backyard entryway, and that I think their grandkids or somebody was over here, and they were walking quickly to greet them, and I could see them stop where you would normally embrace that grandparent and give them a big kiss and a hug and stuff like this and a pat on the back and whatever and receive that. They just mindfully just like stopped, and then I could see that the grandparent, expecting to be hugged and expecting to be, kind of like went, well, all right, that's where we're at right now. you know. And so it was interesting though that they then led this person to sit down and gave them some refreshments. It was so hot. It was just incredibly oppressively hot. Um, but they gave them refreshments, and then they wound up going inside because indeed there was air conditioning inside, and they were able to do that, and they
Mm-hmm.
were able to, take care of that and look out for people that way. It's something natural that you would just naturally do, give somebody a hug, was stopped by the by the situation, so to speak, or the cautions that we all have.
Well, I that happens to us. We get to see our granddaughter, who's local here in Los Angeles area.
How old is she now?
She's 5,
Wow.
believe
Wow.
it, and and so we wear masks when she comes over. She tries to stay 6 feet apart, which is difficult. We try and be outside as much as possible, but this weekend it was impossible because it was 105 here
Crazy.
uh, in Woodland Hills. I thought maybe we could spend a little time out on the porch and we'd be 6 feet apart, and she wore her mask except for eating, and obviously we didn't get close. you know she didn't know this, but after she left that room we sprayed it. We were trying to be safe. It was hard, but here's the kicker: we've been very successful. We've kept our distance, and we're saying goodbye, and she's walking out the door, and she pauses for a second, can't control herself, still wearing a mask, and runs over and gives us a hug, each of us. What in the heck? You know, I mean, it thrilled me that she couldn't control herself in one way, and she just had to hug her grandma and grandpa. And, you know, that's reality. It just is. And she's, you know, staying home. She hardly ever sees a friend. And if they do, they're outside on their scooters. And
Uh, that reminds me of this. There's a scene in Monsters Incorporated. I don't know if you've ever seen that,
I
where
think I did.
the monsters go into a bedroom and scare the kids, and then they collect this energy or whatever it is. You know, that's their business, and then they come back in and close the door, and then the monster turns around and there's a child's sock stuck to the fur of the
Oh,
monster's back, and bells go off and alarms go off, and then the whole thing these guys come in and they shave this hairy monster down
because of sock.
because of a child's sock. Yes.
And you know something? I mean, when you think of it, that's why it's so hard to set rules, firm rules, and expect everything to be adhered to. I think in every aspect of our lives, not just now, but uh, prior to COVID, um, there's always a gauge. It is never perfect. The pendulum always swings back and forth, back and forth. Noise levels go up and down, where you have in writing a certain amount of people are allowed in a room and 10 extra people show. What do? Do you put an extra person at 10 tables? Do
Right.
you drag another table out and shove it into a corner?
Probably.
Or do you put them in the hallway? What I'm really saying is that with every rule, there has to be reasonable variance. And that means the same as threats. You have to weigh what the threat is against the good that it will provide.
Well, that's an interesting a balancing of choices and a balancing of doing the greatest good or the greater good for the situation.
And here comes a point, a very important point that you just brought up. The greatest good, to think of the everyone, meaning the greater or the what is good, and the rights of the individual, opposed to the greater good. And that comes in business as well as thinking about health issues or any other kind of communication. And here is the argument that I faced once, but I want everyone to think about this when they deal with clients, their colleagues, and couples, when dealing with family and with their services. When you think of the greater good, most people would tell you, we're thinking of everyone. In the long run, what is best? Okay, that's the premise. That we're not thinking about the individual. We're thinking about everyone, how they approach it. And then the individual may say, I'm thinking individually what is ethical and moral. And I want that applied. And I'm not as concerned with the greater good. We each have experienced both, I believe, where
Sure.
we will look and say, for the greater good, we cannot force these people to stay in the rain for this ceremony. We have to have another option for the greater good. It may sound, minimalistic of me to bring out one thing like that,
No,
but
it's a
it's
very
a
good analogy.
real concern,
Very, very good analogy.
okay? Because the individual, the bride, is thinking of her personal right, the expense, the effort that she went to, and the efforts of others to create something that her will, where she feels it is right for her to have that individual right to do that.
Right. And to
Now,
request that everybody stand in the rain while she gets married.
I
That's right.
know.
I get it. I get
But
it.
here, we haven't really addressed a moral obligation or an ethical obligation. Is it ethical and moral to ask people to be discomforted to a degree where either they fall ill or are disheveled to a point where they are personally uncomfortable and embarrassed, or that they are so upset that they leave? Okay? Where is that line? I don't know that I can answer that exactly today, but I can tell you that it is an individual decision for everyone that's a part of that greater good
Right.
to decide. As one guest did at another wedding where they didn't like their seat and we were being seated for the grand entrance, and they put up a stink and they wanted to be added to another table. And the management said, I am sorry, our fire laws will not allow us to put that many people at that table in that place in the room. I mean, it had nothing to do with me. I would have put those chairs in, but I knew better. And I had to think of the greater good because it wasn't right for other people to not have a safe route out of that room because was in a corner. Okay?
By an exit.
Well, not close to an exit, across from an exit. So that's one of the reasons they didn't, and there was a kitchen door that was fairly close. So there were a couple of reasons. But that didn't matter to the guests. They just were incensed that they had to sit with these people that they didn't know. So I went over and because I realized there was some commotion going on. So I introduced myself. I said, I'm terribly sorry. You seem to be upset about something. How can I help you? And they said, there's no reason why we were put here. This is the wrong table. We don't know anyone. Our family's over there, and that's where we want to sit. And I said, well, please give me a couple of minutes and let me see if I can arrange that. That table's for 10. The sizing is normally max 10, and you would make 12. I have to check with management to see if that's possible. Well, they were cooling their heels and they didn't like it. And I came back and I said, I'm so sorry. I'm unable to make that change. But if you wouldn't mind waiting until after the first dance, then we might be able to rearrange some of the adjoining tables
Oh my goodness.
so that we could make room for you. I just can't do it right now.
Good. Wow. Well, yeah, yeah,
You
and they.
know what they said to me?
What do you say?
Leave us alone. And they walked out and left the event.
Got rid of them. That was
Well, that's one way, but I got it back at me because the groom said, my cousins wouldn't have gotten upset for nothing. You must have inflamed them. And I
I guess
said,
it runs in the
no,
family.
sir. This is what I said, and this is what I did. And if you had been that couple, I hope you would not have reacted the way they did.
Great, great, great. Wow, what an untenable situation.
Yep. And so that's, part of this. You cannot always make everyone happy.
Well, okay,
The,
and
the
I think
greater good or the individual.
yes,
Rights and morals and ethics.
yes, and I think that people are very very happy for the bride and groom. They're very very happy for the families. They're so glad to be participating in this and being a part of this. And it's just this thing where they're there to help, really. They're there to contribute and they're to well to have a good time
Mm-hmm.
and to not be a stick in the mud and to not be a problem for anybody and send the wine back after it's been opened or something like this. And so I just think that gosh, uh, you handled that very very well. Um,
Well, I don't know if there were any other things I could have done. It was just one of those moments where we were holding up the entire
because
wedding
this guy has got
because of these two people.
yeah
Because once that band started, I wouldn't have been able to hear. I would have had to have taken them out of the room,
yeah
which would I felt would have been worse. And I wanted them to enjoy what the bride and groom were about to do for their grand entrance.
it's not about them.
I
It's
know, but I was trying to somehow give them options. I would be willing to talk to other people and to see if I could get them to be next to them, but just at the next table. They
right.
were 2 tables away. I mean, they were just, they had other issues. I mean,
That's right.
a reasonable person would have said, okay, I'll give you a chance to work this out.
Yeah.
Because it, even though I had an assistant, the time it would have taken me to explain to the assistant what
No.
is going on would have made it worse. I just had to take care of it
Right.
and not hurt everybody else's experience.
Right.
So I think in life we come up against these things, and sometimes we'll put a label on it like um, etiquette, but what it really is human relations. It really is.
Yeah, but you know what? I just think that you bring up a really really good point. That here you've got a tough customer. You've got a guy who's almost unaware of his surroundings, and he's like a little child that said, like, I dropped my ice cream. I want another ice cream now, and this type of thing. And so I just think that uh, it was a blessing that he left, because who knows what the untold things that he would come up with later on in the event.
Well, it
And,
was
and why
both
was
of
a
them,
guy
really.
like that?
It
Why
was
was a
both.
guy like that invited to that event? If he had
Well,
some kind of a track record or a reputation in the family for being trouble,
well,
you know?
if either that, or the mother of the bride is the one who made the seating chart, and she may have made an error
Ooh,
in seating, or felt that, well, they're not first cousins, they're second cousins, and so they can sit 2 tables away from their family, and it shouldn't be a big deal. It could have been a judgment call. It could have been a legitimate situation with the layout of the room. It also could have been the disorganization of the mother of the bride, because I got handed pieces of paper with scratch outs
Ooh,
and circles,
ooh,
and you just knew in your gut when you have that many changes and scratch outs and stuff,
all last minute.
you know that there's going to be some changes, but I didn't receive that list. Would you believe it? I mean, I knew the numbers of how many chairs for each table, but I didn't know the names until the day of the wedding. And I looked at that sheet. I didn't even know who were sitting at those tables.
Right.
I
Oh,
just knew where the tables were supposed to go.
right.
So that's why I'm saying many times in these situations, nobody wants to take responsibility for their own decisions. It's always somebody else's fault for not being gracious. In other words, you caused me to be that way. And that's what the groom was saying. I
Oh,
caused his cousins to behave that way.
there was
Really?
a great interview with, I think it was Clint Eastwood, where he said back in the 80s, the acting motivation, things have changed, and that it was very formulaic of where, how things happen in a movie, and that there was always this uh, period where the bad guy has the good guy at gunpoint or something, and there's this monologue where he's saying, I had a bad childhood, I had a bad upbringing, and that's why I'm going to kill you now. It was the whole motivation for the scene, which is so pallor. It's so weak. It's so unbelievable, really. You know, and so they, um, and this was something that you were, as an actor, were expect to make this believable,
Mm.
and it was just like bad writing, lousy script, rip that out. So anyway, you got to have a better reason for a bad guy to be a bad guy. If there is indeed a reason, and if you feel like you have to explain that every time, well, maybe it's just the guy's a bad guy, and that it isn't because his martini wasn't mixed just right, or something like this.
Yeah.
He walked into that room with a problem before you gave him the martini.
Yeah, because we don't know what their personal relationship was between the husband and wife.
Well,
Or,
he was obviously not there to contribute to the scene.
right, right.
He,
He
his
didn't want to
intention,
just participate to participate. He had an agenda,
yeah,
unfortunately.
yes. So he wasn't there bearing gifts. He was there bearing problems, and he was there bearing.
Well, what happens is you second guess yourself something awful when something like that happens, because you step back and you say, well, I was then bending over to talk quietly. Should I have bent down? Should I have been on, kind of crouched, eye to eye when he was sitting? Would that have helped him? You wouldn't believe
The interest,
how you
yeah,
go through,
yes, I get it.
because you say to yourself, I don't want this ever to happen again. And
Right.
so you try. So in business, when you're talking to your clients the same way, and when as a couple, you're talking to your services and family, maybe, you have to consider where they are. In other words, I don't know if I said this, I truly do not remember, but in my heart, I hope I had said, this is an important event, and having your family close to you really means something to you. In other words, to mirror their feelings. And that's how I've always behaved in these situations, is to acknowledge what they may be thinking or feeling. And
Good.
I thought I had, maybe not with those exact words, but in part to tell them, I understand. And that's why I'm going to do my level best to see if we can accommodate 2 more seats. I had to tell them up front that that table is not large enough normally for 12 people,
Right.
but they didn't care about that,
No, they
you
didn't.
know.
So any rational person would have seen what
Yeah.
you're
I
talking
mean,
about.
it was full.
Yeah.
And
Okay. All right. Well, there you go.
but but who knows? Maybe subconsciously, or maybe not so subconsciously, they felt slighted because they saw other family members sitting there that aren't as close to the parents of the groom. And so they felt slighted because they were put there. And thinking that I had anything to do with that is unfortunate, because obviously I didn't. But that
Yeah.
means they just want to get it out. They have to be able to do it. And I think I took a good step in calling the bride and groom and the parents of the bride, not the parents of the groom because I hadn't known them at all, but I called the day after and wished them well and
Uh-huh.
said, I just wanted to let you know. And that's when the groom, lit into me.
Uh,
And I'm telling you, I lived with that a long time. And that's hard. It really is. I'm not saying that was a healthy thing to do. I'm just saying, when your whole reputation is built on how you serve others,
that's right.
that's what services are. You do your level best to avoid those kinds of situations.
Yes.
And so, in making a full circle here now, with coming back to the times we are living in, I think we have to be extra sensitive that when guests or services or clients are edgy or non-responsive maybe at times, it's not because they have evil intent. It's truly because they're
They're upset.
just dealing the best they can.
Yes. And I think lately this upset that's been spreading around is not helping. There are important issues that need to be addressed and things like that, and don't make the situation worse. Don't pour gasoline on a burning fire.
Yeah.
If anything, that our responsibility is to, yes, to show the humanity of a
Mm-hmm.
situation, to take a look at the solutions to those situations,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not they were good or they were bad or they were, this is what the result was in that. And that, yes, have we learned from that, or have we developed a
Yeah.
policy?
I think it's exercising tolerance too.
Exercising tolerance, but also looking at the person you're dealing with
Yeah.
and really being able to read that person and
Yeah.
and
Which comes back to the
and
mask.
anticipate. Yeah, yeah, and anticipate that person's needs, or anticipate what that person might say or do.
Yeah.
And just having known what we know as professionals, in conducting events and things like this, and it might be better to have that person sit somewhere else.